So, part 2 of the Abattoir Away Days season review, looking at the stats, is actually going to be looking at their record across the series, and then also discussing how we think the Butchers are on the power curve and the interactions between them and other teams and how those games can go, how they can go. So, let's start off. We've got versus the Engineers. It was a 12-4 victory to the Butchers. Versus the Union, it was a 12-2 victory for the Butchers. I nearly said the Union. Game 3. Now this is a good point to bring up a season correction. So considering it is the most viewed video, only one person has picked this up.
Yes, we had initially marked it up as a 12-10 win to the Morticians. On review, as somebody has pointed out, the game actually ended earlier than we had thought, and ultimately the game finished 12-6 to the Butchers. So if we actually go back and review it, there was a takeout earlier in the game that we had not tallied up, which meant that when you were actually on 10 you were actually on 12. So when Brisket scored towards the end of the video,
it took me to 12.
It took you to 12, which would have meant it would have been 12-6 at the time and ended there. We carried on playing.
We were having such a good time.
Yeah.
We genuinely were having a great game.
I think as well, just to touch on what you were mentioning before with Jamie, our games in particular, I feel like it was kind of like a training match where we both discussed all the different options that you could do, the implications of all, and helping each other out. It wasn't like I was just keeping my stuff to myself. We were talking about each other's and trying to, in fact, beat each other.
Yeah.
And let each other in on what our plans were and stuff.
Yeah. Are you going to do that? Because you need to think about that then.
Yeah.
And I can see what you've got here. You've got these. You've got 3 different options here. If you do this one, this is probably going to happen. It was very much like that reverberating, and that's why obviously we enjoy playing against each other as well. That actually was a 12-6 victory to the Butchers.
So 3 wins.
So they got 3 in a row. And then we hit the juggernaut, that is, who cares who wins, which is Steve Newton and his Pure Alchemists. And we'd like to point out that they were Pure Alchemists versus the Engineers. There were Union inclusions. Union, obviously, Union, that's a pure guild. Morticians, you have missed.
Yeah.
But Steve brought a Pure Alchemist team, and I got smashed. It was 12-2. To the Alchemists, and we'll do a little bit of a rundown of each of the games after we've gone through the results. However, the Butchers then came back with a win and beat the Fishermen, Henry Case Fishermen, 12-8, and then took out the Brewers 12-6, that was Ellie and Henry who were doing that. So thanks to those guys. The Butchers then managed to take out the other Butchers in the mirror match, where we tried to show off a more footballing Butchers versus a more damage orientated Butchers, and that was with the lovely Ben Redmond, who handles the rankings. Hi Ben. And then finally, they did finish the season on a low. They did lose to the Trixie Masons 12-6 in a fantastically tactical game, but in the end it was a 6-2 record for the Butchers.
So were you surprised by that?
I was surprised at myself. More the kind of progression each game, the learning. Not in some ways, because I think it's common knowledge out there that the Butchers do seem to be, particularly when people are learning the game, sort of higher on the power curve.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That is quite straightforward on the whole, to start off with, what it is that they need to do. That's very much the impression I get from playing the Butchers.
Yes.
What I do tend to find though is the Butchers do tend to come a bit unstuck when you play against players who have sussed them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think against sort of more experienced players that are very aware of threat ranges and how to shut models down and how to reduce your movement and the impact of knockdowns late in a turn, so that when you start the next turn, you've got a couple of models knocked down. They can feel quite one-dimensional, and they can feel like they don't have as many movement shenanigans as other teams do. So you can come unstuck. I found with playing, I haven't really played with the Butchers myself, but playing against them, they're very much a a swingy, they can win 12-0 or they can get smashed 12-0. So they do have high scoring games and quick.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I mean, you guys out there watching this video, you don't need to know that the Butchers are great at dealing out that damage, but they're not a bad footballing team either. They can certainly kick ball. They've got momentous tackles on low results and the like.
Yeah.
They can be quite good at generating momentum. But what I find that the better and more experienced players are able to do is shut you down and stop you from being able to generate that momentum. Because a Butcher getting first go on turn 2 or 3 when they're in their face isn't where you want to be as an opponent, generally. But they have performed quite well. So 6-2 to the Butchers. I have very much enjoyed using them. They are some of my favourite models in the game. And it has been quite interesting along the way, learning a great deal about what you can and can't do with them. And that brings us to the next part, is actually just kind of discussing quite briefly about the flow of the games versus the different opponents, because that's been one of the key things I think about this series. Is it hasn't just been a match report series where I just have been playing whoever I can, which would be a lot easier, by the way. That would be a lot easier. We have actually tried to get people in to bring the different teams and see the interaction between the two. So let's start off at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, which is the Engineers. So the game versus the Engineers, that was Quinn.
Yeah.
He's become quite a stalwart part of our community. Thank you very much for being involved, Quinn. He used to be called Quinn the James Slayer Duggan, but not anymore. And not just for this either. He's a very good player.
He is.
Yeah, he's really come on.
He has massively.
Massively come on. Now the Engineers, I think, is quite accepted out there on the scene that they're lower on that curve.
They are. I think the common perception at the moment, especially with the bounty still out there, is that they are potentially the weaker of the guilds at present. Whether that's because not as many people have figured them out yet, or whether they're pure, they're perhaps not as strong. I'm not sure what the actual reason is really. But yeah, they are definitely quite a unique team in their play style, the way a lot of people seem to be playing them at the moment, so with the ranged knockdowns. And again, trying to sort of stop the opponent doing what they want to do and where they want to be by knockdowns from range.
Yeah, definitely. And I was quite thankful that when I went to play against Quinn, the game that I'd had before that, I played against Engineers, and I'd also played against Steve Newton with an Engineer Union combo at one of the tournaments. So I had a bit of a good idea about what they did beforehand. Now, what the Engineers should be quite good at doing is, of course, knocking you down and preventing you from getting momentum, or preventing you from getting that quick win, and then their game needs to try and revolve around that effectively. Although not all of them are particularly influence efficient, I would say, and I think that's where they struggle a lot of the time. But versus the Butchers, the key thing for a Butcher player versus the Engineers is you need to get someone to get that initial momentum. Because then no matter how much you are knocked down, you can always stand and back up and do what you need to do. And even just watching back through that game very quickly to get where the takeouts were from, you can tell in that game versus Quinn that was very much happening. I was always able to get someone in, even doing things I wouldn't normally do, like maybe activating Shank earlier than you want, just to rack up that momentum, knowing you can get in, you can hit them, and then no matter what happens, your guys are getting back up, you're going in there, and they're reasonably soft versus a Butcher's team.
Yes.
Reasonably soft.
Yes. I think the problem with the Engineers and why they might perhaps be perceived as not as strong is that they're quite good at VP denial, I found, but they're not particularly great at the moment at scoring VPs themselves. So they can spend a long time just keeping you away, keeping you knocked down and stopping you scoring VPs, but then they have to somehow try and turn that, whilst they're doing that, trying to turn that into VPs themselves by scoring or taking out. And the other problem is with their ranged abilities, they're 1 or 2 dice. So if you miss one of them, that's kind of game over for that turn. So it's a very all or nothing kind of mentality.
It certainly is, and I have to say some of my best results as a Butcher has been versus the Engineers. It's a slower game, especially because Butchers aren't particularly great, I find, in the early game. You really do have to wait until that mid to late game and then the juggernaut starts going, and as soon as you're getting 1, you're getting 2, you're getting 3, and you mince your way through them, as it were. So so thanks for a cracking game, Quinn, and that's very much sort of how the Butchers Engineers games I've been involved in anyway have gone. But if you found something different, or if you're an engineer player that has got a handle on the Butchers, comment below and let us know, because we want to learn, we want to know about it. So the next game, the second game on Abattoir Way, this was of course against your union. Now your union gets quite a lot of stick. It's a pure guild.
It does. I think just because they're not fussy who they play for, so they do seem to turn up quite a lot. Obviously, if every other team you were allowed to include players from them in the union, then you would see them a lot more. And especially, I think there are as good players in the union, in other teams, as there are in the union. If you look at Vitriol, you look at Flint, you look at all of these excellent players for other teams. The only problem is they can't play for other teams. So it doesn't exacerbate the problem that you're getting 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people you're playing against, even if they're not playing union, including those union players. So union do get a lot of stick. They have been hit quite hard with the tweaks, the 2 tweaks that we've had, trying to bring that balance back down. But I think they are still quite up.
They're still very high
on the power curve.
They're very, very high on that power curve, and I think a big part of that perception becomes these guys. It even says in their fluff descriptions, they're specialists. If you want a goal scoring, you've got goal scoring players. You want someone murdering, you've got murdering players. You know, they have those roles there, and every single player can bring something to a team. And that's why, of course, we see them included. Now, what's quite interesting, going into this game, I think I said it at the start as well, I was not confident at all. But this Butchers versus Union does throw up something quite interesting, and it throws up the weakness of either side, which of course is they're quite delicate.
Yeah, they are both very squishy. If you get hold of them and hit them, they both put out a hell of a lot of damage and generate a hell of a lot of momentum. But as soon as somebody starts hitting them back, they don't like it. And obviously with these two being 2 of the stronger hitting teams, that means both sides lose players very quickly, unless you set it up particularly well. As you'll have seen in the video, I lost Blackheart very, very early on from a silly mistake. And we mentioned before the video that both teams do rely quite heavily on their captains, and they kind of knit the team together. So with Ox, with the Brewers, with the Butchers, and with Blackheart with the Union, both teams like those models to go first, go early in the turn, get all their special auras up, and then everybody else piles in. So if you lose either of them, it's very quickly downhill. And
it can in turn be the weaknesses of both teams, can't it? Because as such they can become target priority for your opponent. And in our game, all it took was a little bit of a mistake, and it effectively just had that rollover effect. Now in that game, I think that was one of the first times as a Butcher player that I decided not to be aggressive, because I was aware that, you know, you were able to put out so much damage, and with me being quite delicate, that takeouts was going to be a big thing. And if takeouts were going to be a big thing, I wanted to be on my half so that my players would get back into the game a bit quicker. And sort of covering all of that with Tenderizer. That's when we saw Tenderizer being particularly, you know, put to use, as it were, just giving that kind of cover. And as soon as your captain went down, it was just the delicate nature of the Union was kind of exposed.
And I think that was my undoing in this game in particular, was perhaps my overconfidence and my over-reliance on Blackheart. I still feel now, looking back at the video, in the same way. If I hadn't messed up that and made that mistake, I kind of felt like I was getting the upper hand already that early on. Like if Blackheart, because I'd managed to get the momentum to go first that turn 2, and then if Blackheart could have gone in and killed Shank, which was the intention, you would have been down a player, down influence, and then, as we've said before, it's a snowball effect for both teams. Once you get that momentum train going, and you can always win the next turn and then get the takeout, it's kind of on a winner. And because that very quickly that rug was pulled up from underneath me, And I probably had the opposite view to you going into the game. I thought, I want to get into you as fast as I can. I want to take a few models out, and I want to really put you on the back foot.
Yeah, which you did. You were you were imposing your game at the start, whereas I was very much looking and going, okay, how can I react to this? Which isn't always the best way, but I thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay back. I'm going to wait and see what you try and do, and then I'm going to play my game to that and try and effectively counter and sucker punch you, which is what happened. And there was a nice, not just with him being taken out, there was that moment as well where I went and took out a huge amount of influence off somebody.
Yeah.
You stacked up a huge amount on one person, and I bluffed to do one thing, did the other, took that out of the game, and then that's really where the game came away from the Union. So that was another victory for the Butchers. A very interesting matchup. I think Union have the tools to sort of take that on the whole, but it does just show that the Butchers, they can win that scrap off. They really can win that scrap off. So next up, it was the game versus the Morticians. This is the game, of course, where we believed that the Morticians had won, and were only found out later from Mr. David Cameron. I'm sure he gets sick of this, but not that one.
The other one.
The other one, who is from New Zealand. Well, he's from up here, but he's lives in New Zealand.
I met him at Abattoir, actually.
Yeah, he's a nice guy, really nice guy, good player as well for someone who's only played 2 or 3 times. Yeah, it was a really good game versus him. But anyway, he pointed out that in fact it had been a Butcher's victory. Now this was quite an interesting game. It was an interesting game.
It was.
The Morticians, of course, rely on that control, denying momentum from their opponent, stealing momentum, and forcing the opponent to go when they don't want to go and do things that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
When they don't want to do them.
And I feel, perhaps from my point of view, that I perhaps didn't play the Morticians really to their strengths in this matchup particularly. I kind of went sort of head to head to try and fight you, thinking that Gast is pretty strong and can take a bit of a beating. Obulus can put out a fair amount of damage. Cosset with Dirge around can do a lot of damage, which meant we just ended up with a big rook in the middle, which was exactly where you wanted to be. Exactly
where I wanted to be. And there was a key point as well. Being a delicate team like the Butchers, you want to keep an eye out for things like cover and trying to be an inch away from things like that. And there was that wall in the middle.
Yep.
The scrum was in the middle. It meant that I felt reasonably confident. You said Cosset is the big damage dealer, but that meant that she was always going to be going down quite early. And having learned from playing against Henry, I knew that Gast just needed to be left well alone.
Yeah.
Like just left well alone. And in fact, I mean, he was the takedown that we forgot, but he was probably the most important one in a lot of ways, because him going down was a reflection that the Butchers had completely won that scrum in the middle and was able to get every single person pretty much in there, engaging, ganging up, to finally hack him down, which was the way that it went. And of course, with you scoring, ball comes back out, and Brisket went and did her thing. Very interesting matchup, Morticians, Butchers, I think.
Yeah, with hindsight, I think perhaps playing a bit more defensively with Morticians and using Obulus's Puppet Master or Silence's Shutout to make you go first and last, and really controlling you that way and trying to draw players in one at a time.
Yes, definitely.
Rather than just piling in and...
Definitely, trying to do things like keeping Ox out of it, Because
even just using Obulus to Puppet Master Ox to walk back every turn, so that he spent the first activation walking in, get his aura up, and then Obulus walks him back again, and then all your other players suddenly aren't quite as effective.
Exactly.
But they're not.
So that was a really interesting game, and then it was the game versus the Alchemists. Now, in a lot of ways, I mean, I really enjoyed it. But probably the most frustrating game for the Butchers, because throughout the game, you'll have noticed in the commentary, I honestly felt like I couldn't do anything, and that's a credit to Steve as a player, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Alchemists very much, we could say that they're about the condition game. A lot of the time, it's the Midas show. Midas can do an awful lot. You put the influence on him, and he goes around and he does his thing.
Does what he likes.
But one of the reasons that Steve did so well in this was the condition game, and it was constantly preventing me from being able to generate any momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So at no point was I able to generate any momentum at all, and really, as a result, was just had to come up through the middle and try and get close to him, and as a result was getting kind of picked off and the like.
Yeah.
So a very tough game in that. And how did you find that game when you were watching that?
Yeah, very well done by Steve. And again, he was very aware of how much momentum he allowed you, and it very much felt like it was sort of the master and the apprentice, and he was sort of dictating exactly what he wanted you to do. And because you had so little chance to gain momentum, all these little conditions that were going on you, poison, burning, it was chipping away at your health and your movement, stopping you moving, shutting you down, and ultimately, if you did ever gain momentum, it was a really difficult choice as to what you do with that. And giving a butcher a difficult choice in momentum spend isn't something they're used to.
No.
Really, they're used to having an abundance of momentum. They can heal what they like. They can go first. They can just do whatever the hell. They can counter attack all the time, and you just weren't having that. You weren't being able to play that sort of game. So
I certainly wasn't. It was a very, very good game to be involved in because I learned so much. But you saw that even Steve, there was one mistake he made in that game, and it nearly completely flipped the game.
Yeah.
It nearly completely flipped the game with Boar getting in. He thought that wasn't going to be able to happen. Boar got in, and all of a sudden the momentum changed. That's what you need as a butcher. You just need that player who can get in, who can get those hits. Boar's getting those 4 opportunities to hit, who can rack up the momentum, can get you that 4 minimum, which is what you're really looking for as a butcher, so that then you can start healing, getting conditions off, keeping yourself moving, getting the subsequent turn. And it did almost, although the scoreline doesn't suggest it, swing the other way. Being aware that he needed to get a takeout to win.
Yeah, I think that's key with, like you mentioned, with the Alchemist particularly. You've got to really be on your game to try and play that shutdown sort of style of play. And as soon as one thing goes wrong, or you make a slip up or a mistake, or even a dice roll for initiative or something, and it allows you to then go first and start racking up the momentum, is key. And it's hard work. It takes a lot of mental power. And that ultimately was probably what just got me at the end, because I turned the camera off after doing the hits with Boar. Thought, I should have healed the dog. Looked around the board, thought nothing can get at him. Didn't see that it wasn't a conditional Mercury, it was an influence. Mercury went, sliced the dog, end of the game. So it just shows that even taxing someone to that point, when having to think so much and having to concentrate so hard just to keep in the game, because that's what it felt like, just to even, because I felt like I was drowning, but to even get someone so they feel like they're drowning, the head does come above the water, but then boom, they're down again.
They're down again. So it was a fantastic game versus Steve, and it did show, I think, very well what the Alchemists can do and what they're capable of. Which then brings us on to a fantastic fisherman player, which is Henrique.
Yes.
Okay, and again, a surprising result I found. I didn't expect this. Now, a big hats off to Henry, because he did ask at the start of the game, he said, do you want me to play pure fish, or do you want me to bring the Union? And I think he was going to include Gutter, and was he going to include Hemlock? It was either Gutter and Hemlock, or Gutter and Fangtooth. It was those two. And he said, but I don't mind using the pure fish. I said, it's up to you. I said, it'd be quite cool to see the pure guilds play each other, because Union obviously have already been in, and he made that decision. Now, had it been the other way round, I think we could have seen some serious problems for the butchers.
Yeah, I think with looking at the two teams, I think, as you've alluded to, the butchers put out a lot of damage, but they are also capable of scoring goals, which people are often surprised at. Just how easy they can score goals. The fishermen, as a pure fisherman team, don't really have the same luxury with regards to takeouts. They can score goals very easily, but they can't one activation take models out unless you're pushing people off the pitch. But they can't just do it at the same sort of rate that the butchers can. So it is quite a tough matchup when you look at it from that point of view for fish, when you're doing pure and pure.
Especially when you look at it, and a lot of the time, especially as you become a little bit more experienced in Guild Ball, what I'm finding is that at the start of the game, you have to almost look at it and go, okay, in this game, I'm probably going to need to score 1 goal and get this number of takeouts,
Yeah.
you know, 4 takeouts. Or I'm going to probably get 6 takeouts in this. Or as a fisherman in a pure fish situation, you're probably looking at it and going, I need to score 3 goals. Scoring 2, I think, is doable.
Yeah.
But scoring that third one without everything else having happened against you can be very, very, very tough. So I almost think that pure fish versus butchers isn't the best of matchups for the fish, always, but it can still be a really good game. It's a fantastic game.
It feels a bit like a time bomb, a ticking time bomb for the fish.
Yeah, they've got to do it early.
The quicker they do it, the quicker the game is, the more likely they are to win. As the longer the game goes on, the more it shifts into the butchers. So from a butcher's point of view, if you just try and sort of limit their VP scoring in early turns, and then until you can get up to them, because as soon as the fish start losing players, it's quite hard. And
it's at this point in the series that I did start bringing back in the likes of brisket. Bringing back in the likes of brisket, obviously I already use shank anyway, but recognising that versus these teams that can score the goals, sometimes you have to have someone there who can deter your opponent from scoring the goal unless they're trying to do it on that last activation. Because you can immediately go and counter, and brisket of course is a character who can do that. You know, the ball comes out to her, she snaps it up, she runs up, she shoots with a super shot, she scores.
And the fish don't have a choice really; they have to score goals to win games. I don't think anybody. Put in the comments if you have, but I don't think I've seen. In fact, I saw on Twitter for the first time somebody had got a 6 takeout win with a fish team.
No,
but
is that mostly Union inclusion?
I think Union and Corsair. But yeah, with a pure fish team, it's very, very difficult. So they're going to want to score, and if they're going to score as a butcher player, being able to go back up the other end straight away and get effectively 2 takeouts straight away is a godsend.
Of course it is, and it massively helps having that goal scoring threat as a butcher, because if you look at the first game was all takeouts, I believe, versus the Engineers. Versus the Union, it was all takeouts. Versus the Morticians, it was 4 and a goal. Versus the Alchemists, I managed to get a takeout. Versus the Fishermen, that was 4 takeouts and a goal. Again, so just having that ability as a butcher to be able to get that cheeky goal can be all important, because there's a big difference between killing 4 and killing 6.
It is.
There's a huge difference. So knowing that you've got those tools to be able to do that can be really helpful. Now on the complete flip side to playing against the fish, you've got playing the Brewers, and that was up next. Now I've always found it really interesting playing the Brewers, because on paper in particular, they can do everything the Butchers do, but better, and are tougher. A lot tougher.
I think they are the only team that have less movement shenanigans really on their own players anyway than the Butchers. But you are right, I see them, I hate them, they're my bogey team. They put out, I think, more damage than Butchers, or they can do, but yeah, they are much harder. With Tapper and Hooper both a tough hide, they are really tough as well. They take a good beating.
They certainly do, and they're quite hard to take down. So the fact that they are already, you could say that Ox is negating their tough hide, but really it feels when you're playing against them that it's the other way around. The tough hide is negating Ox's aura. And when your team, as a butcher, revolves around that aura, and it really does, it's one of the weaknesses of the current Butchers team, is that, and as such, good players tend to have Ox as target priority, which is why I tend to be quite a bit more defensive with him than I used to be. When that's the case, it very much feels like they are immediately countering everything that he brings in on that element.
Yeah, the reason that the Butchers do so much damage is because of Ox and his aura and his legendary turn. If that effectively is negated all game, apart from his legendary turn, because of tough hide, they're just back to doing normal damage, which with that and nothing else, really, it's a hard place to be for.
It certainly is. It really is. And in every single game I played against the Brewers, the early game has been brutal for the Butchers. Absolutely brutal. And it's important as a Butchers player, I think, to keep your head.
To try and ride that, yeah.
To ride that. Because what I found is that, so whereas Ox I think on the captain power curve is probably relatively low in a lot of ways, even though he seems amazing.
Yeah, as a solo player, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. On the other end of the scale, Tapper is phenomenal. Tapper, and in my opinion, old Jakes makes him just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Now, I think in most games I played versus a Brewers team, he goes in, he does it, he gets it up on himself, and he's killing Boar in one go. He can
kill Fangtooth in one go.
He can delete a player.
Yep.
He will delete a player. So I've always had that kind of experience. But where the Brewers, I find, have struggled a little bit is after they've got that initial couple of kills. When you start chipping back at them, and you get one or two, they seem to fade away.
They do. I think they're really, really strong collectively as like a wall. As soon as you start taking a piece away from the wall, they can crumble.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if it's Tapper.
Yeah.
And the cat, surprisingly, the cat is ridiculously annoying.
Yeah.
And a lot of other models, Tapper gets. Is it Tapper that gets an extra influence when he starts to turn near the cat? Friday gets buffs because of the cat.
Yeah.
So a lot of things do sort of evolve in a similar way to Princess.
Yeah,
can do.
Certainly can. So that was a really interesting matchup, but again, it was another victory for the Butchers. It's mainly that kind of late game resurgence, as it were, with the Brewers not quite being able to get across the line, and that shows how handy it is also to be able to go and get those goals.
Yes.
And I think taking out Friday and them having the very tough decision to not bring Friday back on and therefore losing that influence for a turn, because she's very delicate. You can take her out. She's probably going to be one of your target priorities as a result, not because of what she necessarily brings to the team, although you are eliminating that 4-point threat, which is going to make winning the game so much easier, rather than killing 6. Killing your 4 and
again, it depends how the game's going and what VPs your opponent has, and whether it actually is more detrimental to you to give them another 2 points than it would be to potentially score for yourself, especially with Shank on the board. You can pretty much get anyone from anywhere.
But I think that was their worry, that she was going to come back on and get shanked. So a victory for the Butchers, which was great, of course, and that took us into our next matchup, which was the mirror match versus Mr. Ben Redmond. Now, Ben contacted me beforehand. And I think there's been a little bit of abuse in certain parts about the team selection. This was very much a game where you didn't have two powered up teams. We were trying to, and it was Ben's suggestion, to try and showcase off
both sides.
Yeah, both sides of the coin. A more footballing team and a more damage orientated team. And also for the first time, get Meat Hook onto the pitch.
Yeah.
And try and sort of show her off in some kind of way. Butchers versus Butchers is an interesting matchup.
It is.
In the same way.
In a similar way to Union. Yeah. So all the things that we discussed with the Union game is the same. They both put out a hell of a lot of damage. They're both quite reliant on the captain being around, and they both go down pretty easily. So it's kind of, the whole battle is who gets that first takeout, or who gets the upper hand on both momentum generation and takeout. So there's probably a lot early game of positioning and bluffing and double bluffing, and you potentially gifting your opponent a model for them to then lose a more important model, and it's all judging that sort of mentality.
And that very much is how that game started off. So remember that Ben took the fighty team that was meant to be sort of more bleed orientated, and like Meat Hook, he did have a Union inclusion of Rage. Well, Rage is basically butchering in some ways, and whereas my team was more the footballing team, and quite early on in the game, I did do a little bit of a bluff. Although I was over to the centre, I threw Princess out going near a wall over on the left flank. It looked like that wasn't necessarily where my team was going to go. He chased after it with Meat Hook, and I kind of bluffed, and all of my team, apart from Tenderizer and Ox, went that way.
You ended up with sort of two pockets, didn't you? He had control of one with Tenderizer, and then you had control of the other with Meat Hook, and it was kind of, it worked in your favour because Tenderizer is a much better model at holding people up, knocking them down and taking more damage than Meat Hook is. So whichever one then resolves first gives you then the freedom to do with the rest of the pitch what you like.
Certainly does, and it was the first time that we got to showcase what Tenderizer can do if you give it the opportunity. Now I think when you're a beginner player, often when you look at character plays and look at things like ground and pound, and you see that it costs 4 influence, you think, well, it's not worth putting 4 influence just to go and do that. But the more you get into the game, the more you realise that your goal really is to try and get those off of your
your playbook.
It's actually to try and trigger it off your playbook, off the big guy. So knowing that he had Boar in there, knowing that butchers benefit from being grouped together, effectively it was Tenderizer that went and won me that game. Getting in there, getting the charge, ground and pounding, causing ridiculous amounts of damage on each, took Ox to within 1. Even then, it showed how delicate the butchers were, because his Ox was able to take out my Ox, you know, and that is always going to be the downfall. But I always felt like I had the grip of where the points were going to be coming from in that game, and ultimately out-slaughtered the slaughtering butchers team.
Yeah, although I think for me it did clearly show how good the butchers can be at scoring. I think Shank scored twice.
He scored twice
in that game. So it really was how dangerous butchers can be if you score a goal or two. It really does take them to the next level. So people should be thinking of this dual scoring goals. How can you effectively score goals and take people out as effectively as possible, and not just trying to go for 6 takeouts?
Because you should be able to get 3 kills as a butcher. I think you should be able to get 3 kills. You know, you should be able to. You'll get 2. Yeah. 2.
Either 2 or 4.
2.
Easily, yeah. In one or 2 activations in turn 2, if you're engaged with stuff, you should get 2 takeouts. And if you've already scored by then, or you're in a position to score, it then just takes you sailing towards.
So that was another victory for the Butchers, which brought us on to the season finale, which was versus the Masons. Now, Masons are a team that I have always struggled against. It's quite interesting because on the forums, people think that Masons are kind of a jack of all trades, sort of middle of the roady kind of team, and by all accounts on the forums seem to struggle against the Butchers. But that's not what my own experience has been. I find them a team that I really struggle against.
Yeah, I think from my view of it, I think Masons are a pretty good matchup for Butchers. Butchers are a pretty good matchup for Masons, so Masons like playing against them, and they are, from your point of view, one of the harder teams to play against, purely because there's not many abilities that you have to negate armour. You're not used to hitting people with 2 or potentially 3 armour in some cases, and that really does limit what you can get off your playbooks. And they have a lot of shenanigans to keep you away. So Mallet with his 3-inch melee, if he's hitting you from 3 inches away, it's really difficult, and they're knocked down relatively easily. So again, like with the engineers from range, but they can do it in melee. If you're knocking Butchers down and then making them spend their momentum to get up, or even not, just negating the movement and trying to hit you, and they're automatically rolling, because of armour too, they're automatically rolling 2 less dice. And an Ox, is he 8 normally? 7 or 8 tack normally? 7. If he's tack 5, he's suddenly not as scary as he has been before. And again with Shank being, is he tack 6 or 5? Being only tack 4 really isn't a huge deal compared to, he's not rapping anymore, he's not doing half as much as he used to. So I think that plays a part.
And also, again, it's one of the weaknesses of the Butchers is with them being relatively delicate. Masons are still capable of putting out that damage, particularly with the captain. Harmony's very good at that, and Mallet can go and snipe people. So it's being aware of the threat. Now, one of the biggest things that I've struggled with versus Masons is all of the little trickery, double activation, or free counters, and all those kind of things. These are the things that the Butchers really struggle against. So I have to say that I did play reasonably defensively, which, in retrospect,
might not have been the best thing.
No, I don't think it was. I completely underestimated the threat range. Completely underestimated the threat range. But a big part of that was due to Giblin covering that middle so well with Brick, and knowing that anybody that I did sort of put up into that, which probably would have been worth sacrificing to be in retrospect, but anybody put into that was probably going to get charged, knocked down and finished off. but then it might have been worth doing that just to draw the rest of the fight. It was an incredibly good game, very, very cagey, and it was one of those that within going into the second turn, I already kind of knew what the score was going to be, because you can see how the game's probably going to play out.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot that I could have done to counter that. You know, being able to double activate with superior strategy is incredible. But a really, really good game. A shame that the Butchers finished off the season on a loss, and they did lose 12-6 there. So in the end, it was 6-2 to the Butchers over the course of that. So I hope you've enjoyed us talking and giving a little bit of a rundown of all the various games and the matchups and how we think Butchers cope in those various matchups, what they have to do versus teams, and what teams probably have to do versus them as well. And I still think they're pretty good on the power curve, aren't
Yeah, I think they're good.
even though they're delicate. So we're all going to look forward to seeing what season 2 will bring.